Hello, friends.
Hello. I had my computer muted. I was like, why can't I hear anything? You would think
Yeah,
all this time, I
the
would learn.
dreaded double mute.
Yep, exactly. I'm sure you can hear all the roosters. Well, the rooster that's outside bothering me.
I can't actually.
Good. That's excellent news.
Take that one a minute.
So what is the schedule of events this evening?
You're going first, and then I'll finish.
Rock and roll.
That would
Ready.
get you out of the way.
Yep.
If we need to.
Well, I'll stick around in
And-
case there's questions.
And there may be other people join later, but there'll be a lot of people who jump on and watch this throughout the week.
Sure.
So numbers will fluctuate some, but we've been picking up views steadily as we go.
All right. Sorry, Brad has a Zoom going on at the same time and his isn't cooperating, so I was trying to fix it for him. All right. Well, I guess it's 7. Do you guys want to go ahead and get started?
Sure. I'm looking where to share my screen
I
and
gave you co-host privileges, so you should be good to go.
okay.
All right. And like Jerry said, this is recorded and we've been having pretty good success with people watching it throughout the week. So we'll just go and roll. I'll go ahead and get started, everybody. I know it's just a couple of us on here so far, but hopefully we'll get some more jumping on. We're going to talk about animal health tonight, and we have Dr. Lowell Midla from Merck here with us, and Jerry Yates from WVU Davis College and Raymond Memorial Farm, and just happy to have you guys with us tonight. And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you since there's not a whole bunch of people waiting. I won't give the whole spiel about Zoom, so I'll just go ahead and turn it over.
No worries. So let me try to share. Maybe you might need to stop sharing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good point. How about that?
Yeah, let me try again. Let me share this. And go to here and then hit this. How are we? Are you seeing
Yep.
drought challenges and opportunities for cow-calf herds?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Lowell Midla, and I'm a veterinarian. Practiced for 24 years. Part of that time was at the vet school at the Ohio State University. About 8 years ago, I joined Merck Animal Health. And I have gives me some extra time to work with good folks like Jerry Yates and the other good folks at WVU Extension. So Jerry asked me to share some thoughts this evening, so let's jump right into it. We're going to talk a little bit about stress and why I hate the term stress. Talk a little bit about managing calves through drought, managing cows through drought, managing gestating calves through drought. And then if we have time, a little bit about working with your veterinarian. So I personally, let's try to get rid of that. Personally, hate the term stress. So anytime you hear anyone say stress causes X, whatever, what that really means is they don't know. They don't know what causes it. They just make it up that stress causes it because they don't know the answer yet. And a great example is gastric ulcers in people. Right. You know, in 1960 or 70 or 80, even if you had a gastric ulcer and went to the doctor, your doctor would say, well, you're under too much stress. There was a physician, microbiologist in Australia named Barry Marshall, who wrote a paper. He had isolated a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori from people with ulcers, and he wrote a paper about that. And the medical community, totally rejected that and said, "You're full of it, Dr. Marshall. You don't know what you're talking about." So then he drank an elixir of those bacteria, Helicobacter pylori, and he got an ulcer. And then with antibiotics, in about 14 days, it went away. And he wrote a paper about that, and the medical community refused to believe him. But then over time, people started to realize that, yes, and this is not all cases of gastric ulcer in people, but yes, many, if not most cases of gastric ulcers in people are caused by a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, not by stress. And if we were all together in a meeting room, I would ask you right now, what is another name for pneumonia in cattle? What is the layman's term? And the answer is shipping fever, right? Well, is it the shipping per se that gives them pneumonia? No. What it is, though, is the stereotypical calf that's weaned off the cow by the method of taking the calf to the sale barn, and then it's transported 1,800 miles to Nebraska, and when it arrives at the feedlot, it's castrated and dehorned, and it's never seen a water trough ever before in its life. It's only knows how to drink from the creek. I'm from the Southwest Pennsylvania, and that's close enough to West Virginia. It's a creek in my lexicon. Only ever knew how to drink from the creek. It has no idea what that metal thing over the corner of the pen is, right? So the point is, we're piling on stressors. Stressors, I understand what those are. I can put a name on those things. Stress is a nebulous thing that just basically means I don't know. So I promise we'll get to drought in a moment. But regarding this concept of stressors, and a related concept is that of the disease triangle. And this actually originated out of plant pathology. But the point of the disease triangle is that no one of these things, between the host, and that's obviously the cow or the calf or the animal, the pathogen, that's the bug, say IBR or Mannheimia hemolytica, and the environment, it's like a three-legged stool. No one leg is more important. If any leg on a three-legged stool fails, then the entire stool fails. And so the host, for example, if the calf didn't get adequate colostrum, or the calf is selenium deficient, the host cannot withstand even a mild disease challenge. If there is an overwhelming number of bugs, right? The calf is born into the manure slop in March, an overwhelming number of bugs. That's going to overwhelm even a normal host. Or the environment, right? For example, roofs, barns. Cattle breathing the same air is a risk factor for pneumonia. The point is, all three, though, are equal. And many veterinarians and many producers focus way too much on the pathogen. What's the bug? Got to know the bug. Can we vaccinate it against the bug? Well, the bug is important, but the host and the environment are just as important. So an example for pneumonia, or BRD, bovine respiratory disease, in cattle is shown here, right? With vaccination, for example, being in green on the left, under the host, meaning we vaccinate to make the host just a little bit more resistant. But also note that vaccination is on the right, because all vaccines are at least a little bit of a stressor. And I can give you several examples of that, but in the interest of time, I won't. But some vaccines more so than others. For example, intranasal vaccines are typically less of a stressor than sub-Q vaccines, and modified live are typically a little bit less than killed vaccines, because they have to put so much antigen in killed to stimulate an immune response. But all of these things are potential ways that the animal can fail and develop pneumonia. So the point of all this is, do not pile on multiple stressors on the same day. And we're here to talk about drought. Drought is just an additional stressor. That's what it is. Certainly, heat is not drought per se, but we've sure seen our fair share of heat in Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia this year. And that is a stressor, right? Many of our cattle, particularly our Angus, Hereford base, our Angus and Herefords are from Scotland and England. Those are sort of northern climate adapted cattle, definitely not southern climate adapted cattle. And then of course dehydration. I just took a photograph. I was home at our farm in Southwest Pennsylvania over the weekend, and I have never seen our creek in our valley stop running. And I took a picture of a dry cattle trail down through the creek. Right, we are short of water. We may have to start hauling water. And obviously the big one is inadequate calories, right? Not enough grass, not enough food, not enough feed, not enough intake. That can be a stressor. And then finally dust, right? That can compromise the lungs and make them more susceptible to pneumonia. And so there's obvious interventions, right? For the heat, we should provide shade, we should provide water, and we should provide supplemental feed. Well, that's easy for a vet boy to sit in his chair and say, right? But it costs money. I get that. So hopefully tonight we'll talk about maybe some alternatives to just providing more feed, right? Going out and buying hay. But remember too, though, that it is our responsibility as stewards of the animals under our care to make sure that they do not have to withstand intense hardship, right? If they need feed, we have to supplement it. So what can we do for the calves? So remember the agenda. We're going to talk about calves, and we're going to talk about cows. So obviously creep feeding, right, is a way to get around that. And I'm sure many of you creep feed generally, even in good years, just to add pounds of calf to sell. But definitely in a drought situation, creep feeding can definitely supplement. Not only because the calf has little grass to eat, but obviously also because when the cow is short on energy, her milk production is going to suffer as well. But the other alternative would be early weaning, right? So if you have March, April born calves, they're only 150 or so days of age right now. That might be, prior to the time that you would typically wean them. They're plenty old enough to wean. And they're going to gain more as long as you do it properly. They're hopefully going to gain more once you wean them and they're in the dry lot and you're feeding them an appropriate ration than they are out there on the drought stressed pasture with mama. Secondly, if you wean them now, you can sell those calves as preconditioned, right? The typical number is 45 days in order to qualify for most programs, but even longer is better. And if you vaccinate them now, then you can, put them on the superior sale or take them to the or contact the order buyer and sell a lot of preconditioned calves, and that'll get you more money for sure. We have data gathered primarily from Superior over the last several years, but preconditioning pays. And the other thing is that preconditioning doesn't only pay because of the nickel or so more you get per pound, but preconditioning mostly pays because they have gained more pounds in the last 45 days and you're selling more pounds. And then finally, preconditioned calves will do better for the buyer, right? And you want to sell them to that person again next year. So or weaning those calves now. In fact, at home, we're going to do that. We don't typically wean for another month and a half, and we are preparing to wean calves here in the next few days. Obviously, you have to feed them, but I checked, and yesterday corn was $3.85 a bushel. You can afford to feed them this year. But the little asterisk on all this is if these are drought stressed calves that are not properly prepared for weaning, we could have trouble. So let's talk a little bit about preparing calves for weaning. Very important is to start them on feed. And obviously, you can do that just with creep feeding. But if you do it just with creep feeding, you need to give it adequate time to make sure all of the calves are started, right? Because what's going to happen the first few days, those big uh, dominant calves or hungry calves or calves that just like the feed are going to get in there. But we need all of the calves to be started on feed. So it takes about probably 2 weeks to ensure that all calves are started. You might even have to push a few calves into the creep feeder just to be sure. An alternative is to just put a pipe across a gate between two fields. And the first day, you'll need to call the cows and calves down, and it'll take a moment or two to push the calves under the pipe. But after the second or third day, the cows know the program. You need to give the cows a bite of feed too, so they'll bring the calves every day. But after a few days, everybody knows the program. You obviously have to have adequate bunk space for all the calves to eat. But if you do that, even just for 7 days ahead of weaning, that will pay big dividends. And then obviously vaccination, right? We want to vaccinate these calves. Weaning, if you look over there on the right, weaning is probably the biggest risk factor for BRD or pneumonia. Of all the stressors, weaning is the most likely time to get pneumonia in these calves. And vaccination can certainly help to prevent that. If you're given a killed vaccine, you need to give 2 rounds of vaccine, both a dose and a booster, with the second dose at least 2 weeks prior to weaning. And I realize if you start that today, then it's going to be another month before you can wean them. But definitely giving some vaccine prior to weaning. I would recommend modified live vaccine in those calves at least 2 weeks prior to weaning. Do not do it at weaning. So notice, I mentioned before that vaccination is always a stressor, right? So we do not want to vaccinate on the day of weaning. That's just adding another stressor onto the stress of weaning. And then finally, these nose weaner thingamabobbers, we have started to use those. So I'll just skip to the next slide and tell you our little story. We do fence line weaning, and fence line weaning is the best. If you can't do fence line weaning, the best thing to do is haul the calves far enough away from the cows so they can't hear each other at night. That's the worst is if the cows and calves can hear each other but can't see each other. But we did fence line weaning, and some years we would get away and be fine, but other years we'd treat up to 20%, one in 5 calves for BRD or pneumonia. BRD being bovine respiratory disease or pneumonia. So some years we would have a wreck. Well, I don't know how many years, we might even have been doing this for 20 years, and we don't creep feed our calves, but we do, as I described earlier, start those calves on feed for about 10 days prior to weaning. And it takes a little work, admittedly. And then we put those weaner things in their nose about 5 days prior. And we have essentially, every year I ask my brother, I said, did you have to treat anything this year? And he can't remember ever. And when I say essentially no pneumonia, he can't remember ever treating any since we've started doing this. Part of the point being that, we can't change the drought. What we can change is the things we do. And cattle get things like BRD or pneumonia in large part to the stressors that humans impose on the cattle. So why not change what we do and then not have pneumonia? It's amazing that we really haven't treated a calf in 15 to 20 years. When you wean them, obviously, and I'm a simple country veterinarian. I am not a nutritionist. I'm not gonna. Don't call me to tell you exactly what ration. But the point is just not too much finely ground corn. If they've been on grass and that's all they've ever seen, and they go on to too much starch too quickly, that's obviously a problem, right? So not too hot a ration and palatable hay. It doesn't have to be, third cutting 22% protein alfalfa. It just has to be green. They just have to eat it. Second cut grass hay is perfect. Green, so they eat it. Palatable. A trick I learned from Dr. Tara well, before I get to that, the other thing is water. And I could go through a 10-minute explanation of how critical water is for immune function. But just trust me, water is critically important for immune function. Those immune cells that find the bugs, dendritic cells that find the bad guys and have to take them to a lymph node in order for the immune system to get started, that all happens much more slowly in a dehydrated animal. So, again, if those calves have never seen a Ritchie fountain or one of those things, with the balls in the, that they have to push down to get water, obviously, just go to Walmart and buy little kiddie swimming pools, or other tubs of some sort, and put them in the pen. The more these calves drink, the less susceptible they are to disease. And so a trick I learned from Dr. Tara Felix at Penn State was that these calves, this is either stocker cattle receiving or weaned calves, they tend to circle, right? They circle the pens. So put that hay and water around the periphery of the pen, and they're going to waste some hay. They're going to trample it. Smile, like it, because that hay, that will pay. Because if they're walking by and they take a bite of it, that'll keep them on feed and keep them eating. And then finally, don't wean calves in a barn, not even under any roof of any sort. When cattle are breathing the same air, they are more susceptible to BRD or pneumonia. I'm going to show you something here, the next slide, to drive that point home. But and then finally, deworm them. Right, we could deworm prior to weaning, but then they're still going to be grazing up new parasites from the pasture for those next few days. So I would deworm right at weaning when they come off pasture into the dry lot. Remember, pasture is the risk. That's where the eggs are. So I would deworm at weaning. So I don't know if you've ever seen these barns that have the slate roofs where they put, the date the barn was built on the top of the roof, with different color slate tiles. What I would suggest is all barns should just have 666 on the top, because barns were designed by the devil to give cattle pneumonia. That's what barns are for. Anytime cattle are under a roof, they're much more likely to develop pneumonia. So what about cows? You should be preg checking your cows every year. That is the single greatest cost benefit thing that a veterinarian can do for you, or you can just run the blood test. I don't care, but the biggest cost incurred on a beef cow calf operation is feed. Most of that is incurred in West Virginia in the wintertime when we're feeding them over winter. And if we're feeding a cow over winter that's not going to give us a paycheck in the form of a calf in the spring, we have wasted that money. So cull open cows, late calvers now before we invest that money. And the other thing is, if you do it now, that's more pasture for the cows that stay. The other thing is body condition scoring. So, cows, there's 365 days in a year. Gestation is about 285 days. So that's 80 days that a cow has to get pregnant. And we know that cows should need to be in body condition score 5, and heifers, first lactation, first calf heifers should be body condition score 6 on the day of calving, because that will lessen the number of days to first estrus. And really, we want them to have gone through an estrus and breed them on the second estrus. So body condition scoring on the day of calving is critical, but you can't fix that on the day of calving. You need to start fixing that now or soon, so that we have them in the right body condition score on the day of calving. And so weaning the calves off, removing that energy drain of lactation helps. The other thing you can do is, if you ask yourselves these 2 questions, do I have the ability in facilities, time, and feed to make 2 groups, 2 cow groups, a thin cow group and a fat cow group, and separate them And do I have enough thin cows to make it worth the effort? If you do, then do it and feed those thin cows a little better. And that will next year affect your ability to get those cows pregnant so that they have calves at the right time the following year. It starts right now today, not next spring, not later. It starts today. And just before you think, and I should have included a slide, I meant to, body condition scoring is not at all difficult. It's basically look at the cow from the side. If you can't see any ribs, she's a 6 or better. If you see 1 to 2 ribs, she's a body condition score 5, and it's usually it's always the hindmost rib, right? The 12th and 13th rib in the back toward the tail of the cow. If you can see those last 2 ribs, she's a 5, and if you can see more than 2 ribs, she's a 4 or less. So that's simple body condition scoring 101. Cows need to be a 5, heifers need to be a 6 or better. So body condition scoring is totally simple. Anyone can do it, but you need to do it today and then act upon those results. So a couple more things, just sort of the easy things. Temporary electric fence. At our farm we own a big long valley, and the tops of the hills of the pasture aren't grazed, and the bottom land down by the creek is grazed like a putting green on a golf course. You can take some temporary electric fence to make some strips, get a solar charger, and sort of divide those cows off to make them go up and graze the top of the hill. The other thing is just a couple of pounds of corn. Right? Corn is cheap right now. A couple of pounds of corn goes a long way. Lots of energy in corn. Obviously, start them on it slowly, but a couple of pounds of corn goes a long way. And then finally, minimize feed waste, right? If you've been thinking about buying a hay saver, round bale feeder, or some other thing, this might be the year to do it because you don't have extra hay. Minimizing feed waste. And those are all things you should probably be doing anyway. Some more outside of the box things are alternate feedstuffs, maybe some distillers or grocery store waste. The other thing is, it's not dry everywhere. They have had rain in some places, but hay's going to go up. I predict that it will. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but buy hay now. And then finally, you might have to put cows in a dry lot. And just put them on corn, a little bit of hay to keep their rumen healthy, but it can be done. So one more little thing. So I mentioned we're going to talk about calves, we're going to talk about cows, and then we're going to talk about gestating calves. So gestating calves are the fetuses that are inside your cows right now for those calves that are going to be born next spring. So just to, I always like to understand something. So just run through this briefly for the nerds among you. Right. So Animal Science 101 is genotype plus environment equals phenotype. Genotype is the genes, the DNA. Environment obviously is, right now we're talking about drought. And then phenotype is what they look like, how much they weigh, how big they are, are they red or are they black? All those are what they are, their phenotype. My phenotype is 6'3", male and ugly. Molecular Biology 101. This is sort of the central dogma of the biochemical basis of life. What I was taught in biology 40 years ago is DNA gets transcribed into messenger RNA, and our messenger RNA gets transcribed into protein, and then proteins is what makes us, right? A structural protein like collagen or bone or muscle, or a functional protein. Like a signal messenger, a cytokine, or GnRH is a reproductive hormone. But it's a protein. It's only 10 amino acids. So what we thought was, if we combine that Animal Science 101 and Molecular Biology 101, that the DNA sequence plus environment that's the whole thing. And it turns out that there's this other thing called epigenetic effects. So it's not just the DNA sequence. Basically, epigenetics is heritable changes that are not the result of that sequence, the GCAT sequence. And just you may have heard the term fetal programming. Well, that's epigenetics. And there's some biochemical reasons this happens. But basically, it regulates if we regulate when the DNA is turned on and how the intensity of when it's turned on, or the intensity of the turning on when it is turned on, that can affect how we grow, particularly as you are forming the organs, as you're forming muscle and the liver and those things inside your mama as a fetus. And so that's sort of the big thing about epigenetics, is it affects us primarily, not exclusively, but primarily as we're a developing fetus when you turn on the DNA, not just the DNA sequence. So it results in phenotypic plasticity with regard to a fixed DNA sequence. The point of why am I telling why do you care? Like, I'm sure people's eyes have glazed over in the last 4 minutes. Well, what matters is maternal nutrient status during gestation can cause epigenetic alteration to this genome, and that is heritable and it impacts future generations. Epigenetic changes are passed on to the next generation. So, excuse me, not only will these calves that are inside mamas right now be affected, but also potentially and probably those calves and those calves, right? And it affects survivability, morbidity, and mortality as neonates, whether or not they get or die from scours, postnatal growth rate, weaning weight. A lot of this work has been done on carcass traits. So muscling and marbling are affected by epigenetics pretty dramatically. Reproductive efficiency, let's say there's a heifer calf inside that cow right now. She went through drought. That heifer, it affects how well she's able to get pregnant as a yearling, and can even affect her daughter's ability to get pregnant. So, but it's important to note that both undernutrition and overnutrition can have epigenetic effects, right? So really the Goldilocks approach is best. So let's say it's next year, it's not a drought, but you remember this. It's kind of like Goldilocks. The porridge can't be too hot, too cold. It just needs to be just right. So really you need to kind of keep your cows, gestating calves, on a plane of nutrition that's roughly equal to that of your normal environment. You want cows, the key in a commercial cow calf operation is to have a cow calf herd that's adapted to your local environment. They can survive and thrive and get pregnant and wean a fat calf in your environment under your environmental conditions. So one last little note is toxicities. Cattle, Jimson weed is, if you look at heavy use areas, corrals and places like that, feeding areas, you might have Jimson weed. It can kill cattle, but I've seen cattle, we have Jimson weed all through a couple of our, heavy use areas, and I've never seen an animal eat it or die from it. But, when they get hungry, that's when you need to start to worry. And so if your cattle are hungry, that's when you need to worry about how many acorns are out underneath the oak trees, how much Jimson weed. Buckeye is typically a spring thing, but I could see it happening in the fall. So, and then finally, you need to watch the neighbors that trim their yew bushes. Yew bushes are evergreens. They don't typically plant them anymore, but historically around, they're a little shrub around houses. And it's the most common toxicity I've seen as a veterinarian is the neighbor or even the cattle owner, trims their yew bush, and they say, "Oh, I bet the cows would like these," and they throw them over the fence. And it only takes a small handful of yew needles to kill a cow. And I mean a literal handful will kill a cow dead. I mean, not slightly dead, all dead. And finally, one more thing: nitrates. Corn grown under drought can be high in nitrates. Most of the nitrates in a corn plant are near the bottom. So if you raise the chop height of your corn silage, raise where the chopper chops it, from, let's say, 6 inches up to 1.5 feet, you're greatly decreasing the potential for nitrate toxicity. But again, I'm a veterinarian. You should talk to your agronomist or your extension agent regarding having the corn silage tested or the appropriate height to raise it. I'm going to skip this little bit about veterinarians and working with your vet, other than to say that really, we tend to use veterinarians for emergency work, right? We have a prolapsed uterus or a calving dystocia, calving problem, calving difficulty. That is the least return on investment for your vet. Pregnancy checks and breeding soundness exams, and setting up your vaccination program. That is the greatest cost return on investment, or benefit to cost ratio that you can use a veterinarian for. So find a vet who likes cows. I know it's hard. I know you're going to tell me it's hard. You can't find one. Yes, you can. Look harder. Find a vet who likes cows, and then don't be afraid to pay them, and smile when you write the check. So the take-home messages: don't ever say stress causes anything ever again. Please, I beg you. There are stressors that we can put a name on, like dehorning and castration and weaning, and it's up to you to manage those. Stressors. Creep feed your calves or wean them early. Preg check, then cull open cows. Body condition score cows, and then supplement thin cows, and then do the things you should be doing better, and consider some new things regarding this drought deal. And then finally, this epigenetics thing means that the effects of drought are not just on those existing cows and calves, but potentially on future generations as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and throw it back to you.
That was excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Midla right now? And you said you're going to stick around for a little while in case some come up?
I will, yes.
Great. If you have a question and you can just unmute yourself and talk right now, or you can put it in the chat box and we'll catch you here in a little bit. But if there are no questions, Jerry, I'll throw it over to you. Maybe.
You're on mute, Jerry. There you go.
Everybody hear me?
There we
Yes.
go.
All right. So Alex, I'm going to attempt to do the screen share thing here.
You got this. I have full faith.
You've disabled my screen sharing.
Oh, are you sharing from Matt Wilson or Jerry?
I'm sharing from Matt Wilson.
Why? Hold on a second. There you go.
Here we are. So get up here at the top. Are you seeing the slides?
Yep.
All right. Now, thanks, Dr. Midla. That's an excellent overview of the things we wanted to expand on. I'm going to spend a little time. I'll hit on some of the things Lowell did. Also want to talk a little bit more about some of the management considerations, particularly where we may find some opportunities. And I know a couple really good vets. One of them's on here, and one of them's couldn't make it because he didn't have internet. But they always tell me that one of the first rules of veterinary medicine is do no additional harm. And so, as we think about stress or all the things that Lowell talked about, and as we consider what we've got to do to manage through the conditions we're in right now, that doesn't mean we can cut corners or take shortcuts. We want to maintain and continue to maintain all of our protocols and our bee quality assurance practices. So we'll throw that one in there. But we are still producing calves. We're a cow calf. Most of us are in the cow calf business. We've got the cattle business, we've got the beef business, and one can't exist without the other. And so just because we're in a drought, we don't want to lose sight of the concept that the calves are still our product. And Lowell talked a little bit about wean calves early. It's one of the most effective drought management strategies that we've got. It's simply because it's way easier to separate that unit at this point in their life and feed each one to maximize their nutrient needs. Early in that calf's life, the best way to feed that calf is through the milk of the cow. That calf has now developed and grown its own rumen, and we can feed it much more efficiently than we can feeding the calf through the cow. And Lowell talked about, particularly when we're early weaning, the fence line weaning is the best scenario. The nose weaners, if you can keep them in, we've heard some higher loss rates of those. So buy good ones. But those things that mitigate that stressful time of weaning are best. Now, the other thing you got to remember is, and we've already seen this, we've been talking to producers, and everybody's calves are lighter. Stocker cattle we turned out this spring are lighter. Calves are going to be lighter. And all these lighter calves have a higher nutrient intake. And we'll see a slide on that in a minute. Dry cows are easier to maintain. So I can separate that calf out and feed it exactly what it needs. Dry cows eat less, and we take the demand lactation off. They're in their second trimester of gestation, and now's the time, if we got to put body condition score back on, it's easier to do it now than any other time. Now, there are some extra concepts here that we're going to throw in tonight. Backgrounding or purchasing replacement heifers. If you are one of these people that has or had planted a lot of corn and intended to shell corn to sell corn grain, you probably don't have that option now. And so is there an opportunity to background calves for someone else or heifers for someone else that will allow you to utilize some of that extra feed resource? Because you might as well chop it. It's either that or brush hog it or chop it and blow it on the ground. So can you do that? And that would put you in a lower capital investment cost. Now, replacement females are going to be expensive. You get 200 miles away from here, there is no drought. The beef industry's got record high prices everywhere. So things are going to be expensive. But rebuilding is going to be expensive, and it's going to take longer. And so really, you're probably in a lot better situation to think about. Now's the time to think about investing some of those record return income from some of those cull cows and cull animals and increase the ability of your female base. There is no doubt right now that we've got a tremendous ability to retain ownership. Lowell mentioned earlier, corn prices are cheap. Feed cost of gains are going to be as reasonable as they've been in a long, long time. The other thing, especially if you've had to cull some cows, retaining ownership might put you in a situation where it helps you manage your income better, depending on where you're at on your tax strategy. You may need to delay some income, and so feeding some cattle can definitely delay that income. And I think we're going to have higher net profits. I think it's going to be a great year to feed cattle. Now, this is a chart of well, shoot, back one, maybe. No, I don't know what I've done. Go back here. This chart gives us nutrient requirements for growing calves. And so just to highlight a couple things, if we're looking at usually weaning 550 pound calves to gain 2 pounds a day, they need a 10.2% crude protein requirement. But if those calves are 100 pounds lighter, we can see that we're going to have to bump up a whole nother percent crude protein. Now, we get down to some of these 4-weight calves to get any kind of decent gains on them at 2 to 2.5 pounds a day. We really increase the nutrient demands from a crude protein standpoint and from an energy standpoint. So this is TDN's an estimate of energy content, and it's the easiest one to work with for us right now. But you see the same kind of thing. To get 2 pounds of gain, we're gonna on these bigger calves, we're gonna need to see an increased amount of energy. And so the crude protein's the big difference on these lighter calves. The other thing that we'll talk about is then, so what's that mean for our expected forages? So here's a chart that gives us an idea. So this is normal corn silage. It's a pretty good test for normal corn silage, about a 71% total digestible nutrient content. Now, corn stalklage is a product that is where a lot of, in different parts of the country, they snap ears off and they do high moisture earlage. Then they'll go ahead and chop and sile the stalks. So this is a much similar product to a lot of the corn silage that's going to be made in our part of the world this fall. There's going to be very, very few ears on a lot of silage. I've heard reports anywhere from 1 or 2 or 3 bushel the acre yield to not very many people at all, or over 100. And so you can see the big difference in how much total digestible nutrients there are in well-eared corn silage at 71% versus corn stalks at 53%. And so the point here is that whatever you are feeding, you're going to have less energy. Now, the good news is, like Lowell said, corn's cheap. We can afford to supplement some energy, but understand that normal performance levels are not going to be encountered this year, not hardly on any operation, simply because we don't have the energy density of the silages that we're going to be feeding, especially our background guys. And so corn silage by dry matter content is about 50% grain anyway. So we're going to be way short on energy levels. So be expecting to add energy or sacrifice performance on cattle and calves if you're going to keep them this fall, and as long as we feed up the feedstuffs that we made this year. Now, Lowell said it best. The best thing you can do is get rid of the freeloaders. And we talked about this the last time we had a meeting, but pregnancy diagnosis is the cheapest thing you can do. Get a vet and find out what those reproductive status on all your employees are. I mean, you wouldn't hire somebody to work for you all year and then tell them they don't have to come to work. So those cows that don't have a calf or that aren't pregnant, that aren't going to give you a calf, they got to go. Now, this is also a great opportunity to do some production culling. Age, look for structural defects, bad udders, bottle teats, bad eyes, bad attitudes. There is nobody there's not a cow alive that's worth you getting chased or hurt over. Those cows, there's a special place for those cows. It's called the harvest floor. We'll talk about body condition score in a little bit, other than to say that now's the best time to change it. After you wean calves, you've got an opportunity to really effectively and efficiently change body condition score. You've got tremendous opportunity with record cow, prices and bull prices right now. Now, on your feedstuffs, we're talking about taking inventory here of your water resources, your forage resources, and your feedstuffs. Bruce and Brad did a great job last week talking about forage availability and what's out there. How can we expand it and extend it? But what I would tell you is whatever you're planning on feeding this winter, you need to get it tested. There's resources available we learned the first week to help you cover the cost of those tests. And there's resources available to help you understand what they say. Next thing I'd tell you is you've got to count and quantify your stored feeds. This is the year you got to know exactly how many bales of hay you got. And Lowell made a good point. Every pound of hay that you put in the shed that gets wasted is feed lost. And I've said before, and I'll say again, the outside 4 inches of a 4x5 round bale contains 24% of the volume of the hay in that bale. So do everything you can to protect what limited feed resources that you've made this year. There are a couple of really good web resources here for those who want to go back and watch the Zoom later that you can click on and get really nice from the University of Wisconsin. They do a really nice job helping you think about and inventory your feed resources. And there's also an Excel spreadsheet calculator to help you estimate exactly how much you need. Now, having said that, Bruce had a good example of an standing forage calculator or pasture calculator. You can use that, but all of these estimates are based on estimations of dry matter intake. Beef cows will consume between 1 to 3% of their body weight in dry matter daily. Now, the lower the quality of feed, the less of that feed those cows are going to be able to eat. It's possible for cows to stand around starving to death with their bellies full. That's because of something called NDF and ADF. NDF's neutral detergent fiber. That's going to be reported in that feed test, that analysis. And ADF is acid detergent fiber. NDF tells us how much an animal can eat. It gives us an estimate of what the potential of that animal can eat. ADF is an inverse relationship of the digestibility. So the higher the ADF of your forage content, the less digestible it is. The less digestible it is, the less energy is going to be in it. Now, even dry hay you made, even dry hay you made in a drought, it's going to have a little bit of water in it. So it's not a one-to-one relationship when you're figuring, say, my cow's going to eat 2% of their body weight a day. Well, understand that for every 1,000 pounds of hay you have on hand, you really probably only have 900 pounds of dry matter, because 10% of it's still water. The other problem we always run into when we start talking about estimating dry matter intakes, what do your cows really weigh? Well, it kind of depends on when you manage and how you manage your cow operation. But here's a good rule of thumb. If you're one of those people that stays on top of marketing and when you think about, the first thing you need to do is go back and grab as many scale tickets or as many check stubs as you can find dating back the last few years and look at your cow weights. Odds are they're trending up. Now, so that's the first thing you need to do. Now, the other thing you got to look at is the average. Think about the cows that you sell. Are they fatter than the average cow at home or thinner? They're almost always one or the other. You know, we have people that stay on top of things and they might be a little bit on the thinner side. Then we got people that sometimes that cow missed a calf and we didn't get her sold. And next thing you know, she's out there for an extra year. You know, she's really, really in good shape. Boy, she's an easy keeper. Hasn't had a calf in 2 years, but she could be the best cow on the farm. And so understand that the best way to, if you don't have the ability to weigh your cows, and you don't know what your cow's average weight is, the next best thing you can do is take a look at your scale tickets, look at your trend line, where your weights are on the cows that you're selling, the cull cows. Then ask yourself, are these cows a little fatter or a little thinner or about the same as the bulk of my cows? That'll give you what you need to know. What my cows' average weights are, what my dry matter expected intake is going to be, how good's my forage. You're going to get that out of that feed test. Then we're going to be able to sit down and make a really good determination on how much feed I need to get through the winter. Now, Group Feed and Lowell made a great point with that. If you have the ability to segregate your cows and feed according to body condition score, that's something that pays every time. And that's something you should be doing regardless of whether we're in a drought or not. If you have the ability to group those cows, you should group them. The other thing I tell you is there's lots of help and resources available for your local extension office. Don't be afraid to reach out to those people and get some help. This stuff's not super hard, but if you've not done a lot of it or you're not seeing a lot of those tests, it can get kind of busy, and so they can help you interpret those. Now, you got to seize the opportunity to improve your herd. This is the silver lining of this drought, is that this drought's going to provide us an opportunity to call strategically and select targeted genetics to help us meet our goal. Problem with that is if you don't have a breeding goal, you don't know where you want to be with your cow herd. It's awful hard to pick a roadmap. When I have kids come over for the bio ag classes every spring, one of the things we talk about is, how do you guys get somewhere you've never been before? You're going to use a GPS. And, what's the very first thing your GPS wants to know? Well, most everybody thinks the first thing the GPS wants to know is where I'm going. Nope. The very first thing it has to know is where you're at. You got to know where you're at. Then you got to decide where you want to go. And this is an opportunity to change that direction now if you want to change it. Got a real opportunity to make some genetic improvements. Now, Bruce and Dave, or Bruce and Brad, did a great job last week talking about positioning yourself so that you're going to be in better shape for the next drought. We talked about that. It's been one of the running themes of these webinars. You should be taking all the steps you can now to make sure that you're in a better position to mitigate the next drought. And I will promise you that whatever steps you take will help you get through the next drought better, but they will make you a much, much better forage manager in a normal year. Can you improve your pasture forage resources to reduce your stored feed use? This is a great time to think about in the future with this smaller number of cows. Can I extend my grazing season? Can I get 30 days on either end of it? Makes a huge difference for how much it costs to winter a cow in West Virginia. Every day that you cut off of the amount of time you got to feed her stored feed is going to make you money. Now, the other thing is, obviously, coming from the bull test station, it's a great time to talk about your bull battery. Are you taking advantage of the last free lunch in the world of heterosis? And if not, why not? Or if not, then are you at least using higher growth bulls or bulls that match your needs? Growth and calving needs are kind of inversely related. So thinking about that, all those calving bulls generally cost a little more money too. Are you better off to purchase your replacement females and gain the extra weight? We've got reams of data that indicate we are. We just don't seem to want to look to do that. And in all of these challenges, these droughts bring us, or these other conditions, whatever we may face, bring us their opportunities. But you've got to have your head above water enough and be clear thinking enough to look for the opportunities that are presented in these challenges. Forage conditions. Lowell talked earlier about nitrate poisoning. There's a harvest management issue. Certainly, we got to raise that chopper head up. Now, I know it's a competing idea. I need as much yield as I can get, but all the huge concentration of nitrates in the bottom 10 inches of that plant. Now, ensiling will take care of about half the nitrates that are in your feedstuffs. The other thing we can do is we can dilute them. The solution to pollution is dilution, and that same thing with nitrates. If you have a high nitrate crop, it doesn't mean you can't feed it. You just have to dilute it. Now, the other thing about that is you can't just bucket mix this stuff. You're going to have a TMR card if you're going to use the dilution factor. What's corn silage worth with no ears on it? There's a couple good resources on here for the people who want to go back and look. And remember, a lot of byproduct feedstuffs are byproducts because something's been removed from them. So those are the kind of products you want to test every load and work with your nutritionists to feed a balanced ration. Now, Lowell talked a little bit about body condition score. One of the major components of body condition score is whether that little cow's 4-inch cutter bar at the front of its head is effective at harvesting grass. You don't go mow hay with a section out of the mowing machine or a blade off the disc mine. And cows have a rough time eating when they don't have any knives to cut grass with. Bottle teats are another big problem. These are the opportunities. Now's the time with these record prices to call hard and call deep. I'll plug Lowell's veterinary client patient relationship. We're in a relationship-based business, folks, and I can tell you, one of the best relationships you can have is with a competent, good, large animal veterinarian that will help you and has the ability to help you make other management decisions. It more than pays for itself. And I think that as time goes on and we continue to see changes in antibiotic use, we're going to need to rely more and more heavily on these veterinary patient relationships and our ability to get the drugs we need to be good stewards and take care of our animals the way we need to, but to have judicious use of antibiotics as well. So body condition scoring. There's Lowell's ribs. All of these cows, there's 1, 2, and a 3 there. You're thinking about Lowell's view from the side. We don't want to see cows in this shape at all. They're all too thin. Put all those in there. Now, most of the 1s and 2s, you don't see a lot of those cattle around here. Dairy cows get that thin. But I've seen some threes. I was at the sale the other day. There are some 10 cows coming in, and we expect to see that. Been a huge nutritional challenge this summer. And so these are the cows, if we're going to keep around, these are those targeted groups for that extra feeding. These are those segregated groups that Lowell's talked about, the 3s and the 4s of the world. Now, once you get above the 3s and 4s where we want to try to make the big difference, we get up to these 5s and we want to have the 6s. Now, this is where we probably want to talk about the upper end of that limit. If we get on to this next level, these cows just carry a lot of extra nutrients that aren't really doing them any good. And these are those cows that I talked about earlier. Remember I said the ones that slipped the calf last year and we didn't get her sold. And, next thing you know, that cow's standing around and she's the best cow I ever had. Hadn't had a calf in 2 years. And there's where you get in trouble. And these cows can suck up a lot of groceries. The other thing you often find about these cows is Lowell talked about those boss cows or those old dominant cows. They tend to be these kind of cows. And now is a great time to get rid of them because they're worth a fortune. We'll get on to the next. So I will close with these slides. Remind everybody again about the continued warm weather that we're having. We got a little reprieve, but it's going to warm back up again. Thinking about those conditions that cause stressors, Lowell talked about. Crowded situations in Holland. If we ought to put 666 on all the barns, there's an awful lot of guys that haul cattle into sale barns and from place to place that way overcrowded, and that air movement in those trailers can be just as devastatingly bad in those trailers as it can be in those barns with a 666 on the roof. Good load density chart here. You can find these resources online if you want them. You can go back and look at this soon, but there's a really good opportunity to have discussions with Alex or with your local agent about transportation beef quality assurance. There's a whole program designed around transporting animals. There's a professional program and there's a layman program. I would encourage people to go through both, or if you're going to do one, do the professional, because you'll learn everything in there you need to know for either one of them anyway. But they're tremendously great programs. You can get them online. We can do one in person, but lots of good common sense information in those transportation beef quality assurance programs. Lameness and fitness for transport, conditions like we've had this summer. This is when these conditions they accelerate. They tend to pop up more. Lots of times those cattle don't have enough energy resources or enough padding. The bruises get worse. The joint issues get worse. And so we want to be cognizant of the product we put out there. I like to ask people all the time, probably the best test in the world is, and I wanted to print these bumper stickers and nobody ever would fund them. But, I always wanted to print a bunch of bumper stickers and hand them out and ask, would you eat what you just loaded? And I think that's a good test for where you ought to be. Never transport down the animals. These slings are, we have one here for transporting non-ambulatory animals. If anybody ever wants to borrow that, just reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to loan it out. It's easy to use. It's very effective, and it is much more humane. With that, I would take any questions. Encourage everyone to look for the opportunities in the challenges that this drought's given us. What doesn't kill us will make us stronger. And what can you do in your operation to ensure that when we get out the other side of this and the rain comes again, which it will, and the grass grows again like it should, and the corn grows the way we want it, what can you do now and manage to change to make you a better producer when the good times return? That's all I have, Alex.
Great job, Jerry. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. Does anybody have any questions?
One thing I would have for Dr. Midla, I think is the he and I talked earlier about him agreeing to help us out. We certainly thank him for the great presentation. But as we expand on the concept of fetal programming, Doc, I think it's very, very important for people to understand that there's been a lot of research done on fetal programming. We kind of got an idea. We know what's going to happen, So are we better off just to abandon this calf crop, or can we manage our way through part of that if we're talking about keeping females out of this situation? Or is it a situation where the strongest survive, and survival of the fittest means if I got cows that, if I got in utero heifers that lived through what they lived through this summer and become cows, are they going to be rock stars? Or what's your crystal ball say about how I need to manage animals that went through fetal programming in times of stress, and should I do things differently in the future with that group of cows?
Yeah, outstanding question. Yeah, yes, and yes are my answers. So I don't know is a probably good answer. Here's what I think, though. I think that the key is we're down from 32 million beef cows to 28.5, 29 million beef cows, right? And you mentioned it very appropriately several times that cow numbers are down, and so that gives us an opportunity, right? So I wouldn't, to answer your first question, I wouldn't just ship them all as feedlot cattle. I wouldn't give up on them. Fetal those effects, the DNA sequence plus the environment is still the primary determinant of phenotype, right? So secondly, though, you might want to keep, let's say you typically keep about 2/3 of your heifers. Well, we might anticipate that we might have a little bit lower pregnancy rates in our yearlings, in our heifers. So we might keep 70-75%, keep a few extra, right? Because from everything I've seen, cow numbers are so low that feeder cattle will still be worth money next year, and fat cattle. So keep a few extra. And just what you exactly alluded to, let them sort themselves out, right? On things we can measure, growth and getting pregnant and those things. And then as those cows go on and mature and become mama cows, they'll continue to sort themselves out. But I would not give up on them. I would keep them, keep a few extra, let them go ahead and cull themselves based on performance. And epigenetics, that's all well and good for smart vet boy to sit here and talk about it, but they're not going to fall off a rock. And yeah, these epigenetic things are semi-permanent to permanent. But then those heifers are going to gestate calves in their own uterus and have epigenetic effects on the next generation, et cetera. And it's additive. So don't give up on them. Give them a chance. Let's keep a few extra. Let them sort themselves out, because either way, they're going to be worth money, and replacements are going to be darn expensive. So,
yep, and I think that's right, Doc. I think I had this. The reason I asked, I had this similar conversation with somebody last week about this very topic, and I think it's one of the situations where you really allow, like you said, those cattle to give them the opportunity to sort themselves out.
Yep.
And I think that's a big component of this. The other thing that I think is very critical for everyone to remember moving forward is that the primary, still, no matter what we do in this industry, the single largest indicator of profitability is pregnancy rate, right? Is reproductive performance.
Yep.
And so at some point we've got to get, whatever, if that cow has a live calf, we'll figure out something to do with it. And right now they're all worth a fortune, but we've got to find ways to make sure that we continue to allow our cattle every chance they can to get bred. Nutritional status is a huge component of that. And moving into this coming calving season, and then thinking about spring breeding season, spring 2025, understand that you need to be positioning yourself and managing those cows now to set yourself up for the best possible reproductive success and managing body condition score now for spring 2025 breeding season. And now's the time to do that. If you're trying to catch that up after they've calved or starting sometime third trimester, you're going to be behind the 8 ball all the way. And so thinking now, you need to be thinking about getting cows bred next spring and what I can do now to change it.
Yep, that's absolutely right. You know, body condition score on the day of calving is the primary determinant of days to cyclicity, but we're much better able if we start now to affect that than if we start later.
Yes, sir. So, well, Alex, I don't see other questions either. We've got other folks that will tune in, and they miss an opportunity to visit with an extremely intelligent vet man. And
we're going to get him a cape that says vet boy.
Yeah, there you go. But, so that's all we have, I think, for tonight. Alex, what's on tap?
So next week at 7:00, September 12th, we are going to be talking about risk management strategies and economics and a little bit about insurance. We have Dr. Peel and Chelsea French both scheduled to be on. Jerry, do you have a more in detailed description of what he's going to talk about?
Yeah, so Dr. Peel's going to talk about his crystal ball for where the cattle market is. He's going to stress and encourage the use of some risk management tools. And, Daryl's just a great ag economist, tremendous understanding of the beef sector. And anytime you get a chance to listen to Daryl Peel talk, you should not pass that up.
So we look forward to seeing everybody then. I also want to just do my little sprinkle of positive thoughts for each week. And so this week I came up with some tips for peace. So it's inner peace and mental peace. And some of these I think are more impactful than others, but I think they're all worth sharing. And I just have to go back and mention something Jerry said and Dr. Midla said both about right now. We can't change what's happening. We can't change the drought, but we can change how we are managing and how we react to it. And I think really important thing to remember, even though it's sometimes hard to remember to do that. And then having those relationships with people that can help you. We do a activity in some of our mental health or stress management workshops where we throw a bunch of balloons at a farmer, and all of the balloons have a different thing on them. One says weather, one says feed, one says whatever, a bunch of different things. And you can't hold all the balloons at once. They're all falling to the ground. They're floating everywhere. It's a mess. But when you bring in your financial guy, or you bring in your vet, and you bring in your extension agent, you can keep the balloons up in the air. So I think it's just really important to continue to maintain those relationships with your vet and your friends and your family and your financial guys and whoever it might be that's helping you get through each day. But to go back to my tips for peace, I saw this on the internet the other day and I thought it was really interesting and really thoughtful, but people don't fake being depressed, they fake being okay. So if you are noticing some of your neighbors or family or friends having problems and are feeling down, ask the questions. You could save a life. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to, grouch at you about something, but at least you asked and you know that you did what you could. You can't be grateful and anxious at the same time. So if you're feeling really anxious and anxiety arises, try to focus on things to be grateful for, which is really hard sometimes when you've been battling weather or something that's so completely out of your hands, but just make those efforts to try to do that. Ask yourself when things are going on if it's going to matter in a week or in a month or in a year. and yes, the stuff that we're going through right now will matter in a week, in a month, in a year, but our reaction on how we're planning and the things that we're going to do to change maybe our operations for the future or plans to have in case this ever comes again will affect that. And just like Jerry said, the rain will come, the grass will grow. If things are bothering you, maybe step back, don't always jump on everybody or anything. If it's still bothering you in 24 hours, do something about it within 48. A bad day doesn't mean a bad life. So, this bad season doesn't mean a bad forever. This one's one of my favorites. And I think as farmers, we're not always the best at doing this, but treat yourself like someone you're responsible for taking care of. Treat yourself like the animals that you're trying to take care of. Take care of yourself too. And my favorite one comes from our dear friend, Dave Workman. And his secret to being the great guy that he is don't let anyone steal your joy. So don't let anybody else take the power from you to be happy. And just try to get through every day and know that you're not alone and we're all here for you. So I'll shut up now and move on. But that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments? There's still time to sign up for this weekend's Ag Field Day at Wardensville. So if you're interested in joining us for that, just give me a holler or holler out right now. We'll have fencing demonstrations and some more mental health resources and dinner, and it should be a great time. The weather looks nice. What else we got, Jerry?
I think that's it. Look forward to seeing everybody Saturday, next Thursday. Continue to pray for rain, and this too shall pass. And I think we still are engaged in the greatest industry in this country, and that's something we can be thankful for. And we're blessed every day we get to go out and work with the people that do this stuff for a living and what we do ourselves. And there's no greater opportunity than to be the stewards of the animals that the Lord gave us dominion over and how they benefit all humanity. So we don't ever want to lose sight of that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, good night, and thanks again to everybody.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Doc.
You bet.